In the last video, we finished up our first example using context in place of Redux to share information and change information inside of our application. In this video, I want to very quickly mention a couple of reasons that I recommend you continue to use Redux in any serious application that you plan to work on. So here's my big reasons. With Redux, we get some excellent documentation. I don't know if you've ever looked at the documentation for the Redux library, but it is pretty top-notch. It is very well written, there are great examples, and in general, you can kind of understand exactly what's going on. In addition, with Redux, there are extremely well-known design patterns. Online, there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of different tutorials that tell you exactly how to work with Redux and how to handle a variety of different scenarios. In addition, there are a tremendous number of open source libraries specifically made to help you work with Redux. So these are all very good reasons to continue to use Redux inside of any serious project you plan to work on. Why would we use context? Well, with context, we don't have to use an extra library. And that's kind of like pretty much it, to be honest. That's the only big benefit to using context in place of Redux. We do not have to use a separate library. Now, some of the challenges of context are that it's really hard to build one of these store components, like the language store that we just saw, that has cross-cutting concerns. In other words, we would probably want to build a separate store component for each type of resource that we have inside of our application. So for example, if we have languages, we would have a language store. If we plan to have authentication, we might want to create a user store or something like that. And these would probably all be separate React components. Sharing data between these different stores would be really challenging. So I want you to remember back to one of the applications we worked on, the streaming application. So here's the code for the streaming application. I've got it up inside of my code editor right here. And here's an action creator that we put together to create a new stream. Remember, we had said that when we created a stream, we wanted to associate the user ID of the currently authenticated user with the stream that was created. So inside of a single action creator, we were able to reach into our entire state object, get access to all the data inside of Redux, and use it to essentially associate the current user ID with this newly created stream. So inside of a single action creator, we could get access to all of the data of our entire application. Doing that same thing inside of one of these store components would be far, far more challenging. We would have to make sure that we called any callback like this right here with all the appropriate arguments. So essentially inside of some component, if we wanted to associate a language with say like a user ID for some crazy reason, we would have to call this callback function with the language and the user ID. It would be really hard to write some code inside of here that reached into another store of data and pulled some data out of it. So that's definitely a really big challenge with this approach, and one that I'm not sure people have done a lot of research on to figure out a best approach of dealing with it. All right, so there are good reasons to use context. There's a little bit less code that we had to write. Yeah, we didn't have to use that extra library, but at the end of the day, I think that personally, it makes a lot of sense to continue to use Redux for any serious application that you plan to work on. So once again, I just want to throw this video in here just to get you thinking about some things and help you understand and just know that, hey, we're still using Redux, right? We're still in a Redux world. It is still an extremely popular library. And just because context exists doesn't mean that Redux is just going to suddenly die out or anything like that. All right, let's take a pause right here and we'll continue in the next video.